Patricia Fero to Kitchen Table Conversations. Welcome to my kitchen table.
Here we are, your beautiful fruit behind you. And I know we've talked about this for a really long time, but now here we are at your kitchen table, finally having this conversation that we've been looking forward to having for a long time.
Yeah, and the most nutrient rich conversations and juiciest conversations happen at, or I should say in my life, have happened at my kitchen table, which was so important. If I was going to be discussing the different elements that informed me while I was writing and then developing the Liminal Odyssey, the book and the philosophy, and I knew that there's so much more than I could possibly articulate or should, because that wisdom that was coming to me and informing me by people like you and the other guests that I have hosted and am hosting, could not possibly be told in a book in one place. And yet there's so much more wisdom that ever could possibly be told. And that's why these calls are so important and helpful for me anyway. So so it's just a thrill and an honor to have you here to expand on those conversations.
Well, what comes up for me, Sandy, and that's what I like to do. I like to listen internally and see what pops up. And what just pops up as I was listening to you is I'm going to have a crone ceremony in next Monday. And you so generously sent me the red tent fabric that will be a central piece. And what comes for me is this saying that I heard one time: when an older person dies or an elder dies, it's like burning a library. And I got some chills on that one. We carry so much. So doing something like this, then, who knows what's going to come up in our conversation today, but it'll be there for people to see if they want to.
Saving the library. This is our archive of,
Right.
of your wisdom. Oh, that is just stunning. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because no matter how many books you can write, and you've written some gorgeous books, or anybody also could write, we're never going to really truly get to the essence of the individual unless you really can have this sort of a conversation. And the topic that we are, the title of this conversation is essence to essence relationships. Let's talk about that essence, and how do we show up in that essence? Because if it's going to be essence to essence, we both have to be in our integrity of our full essence, right?
Absolutely. I think what I'll do is I'll share an experience with you. Quite a few years ago, I decided to write a book called Sisters Stewarding the Shift. And I worked with Jeannie DeRusso, and she did this beautiful editing. And that's what the basis was. It was essence to essence communication with each of the women that I interviewed. And what we all knew, actually, we all had been around for a while, so we knew it, that when you engage in essence to essence communication, what happens is a third energy shows up. That's spirit. And so, our own spirit, but then the, what would you call it? I'll just call it higher realms for lack of a better thing. But the essence to essence communication creates a container for what wants to show up. And then following that thread, which is of course what you talked about when I interviewed you for what happens when women converge, the thread that you followed with your family. And of course, Jean Boland talks about that, the invisible thread. I wonder, we're doing essence to essence communication right now. Do you feel like sharing a quick clip of that, what you shared in the book about the thread?
Kids were little.
Yeah.
Kids were little. Yeah, perhaps that was my initiation into the thrill of following the thread. When my kids were little, we always wanted to make a big deal, and I still do, and they're in their 30s now, of their birthdays. Really want to just make it fun and memorable. And I always felt like it was my birthday too. So who am I kidding? But what I would do, and my husband and I would do, is we would plant their gifts somewhere in the house, but they had to go either on a scavenger hunt. But what the story I told in your book was when I would string a piece of yarn all around the house, in and out of the bathrooms, in and out of cupboards, in and out of rooms, that would take them a great deal of time to have to find. But the looking for it and the joy in like thinking they're going to get it. No, it's just going around the toilet now, and then they find themselves in the backyard or wherever that gift actually was. And it was so much more worth the journey than just being handed the gift and opening it and being happy. Right? Which is what so many of us want. We just want it given to us. And we think that perhaps, and I'm speaking for myself, that if I have to work at finding it, that what I ultimately end up with, the gift, is so much more rich and valuable. And sometimes I don't even know I'm looking for a gift. As a matter of fact, most of the time I'm not on a search for a gift. I just keep following the yes, and maybe with a internal signal that there is a gift at the end of this. And for me, that is but I'm not cognitively aware of it. I just feel it in my bones. Like I have to follow this because there's something juicy.
Right.
And that was the story I told.
Mm-hmm. And the communication, what comes up for me in listening to you right now and loving your book. And one of the thoughts that's come up for me in reading your book and your language of the Liminal Odyssey is that threshold, that space in between, is like a pregnant pause. You're moving from one to another space, and you're in Kairos time, not in Chronos time, and just waiting and watching to show up without effort and without searching. So it's just an interesting energy to be talking about.
Well, and first I want to credit you for bringing that into light for me. And as I was writing, you said, I really suggest you have, since I know you're going to be talking to Jean Shinoda Bolen, I really talked to her about Kairos and Chronos time. So I thank you for that. You brought so much wisdom into the pages, as your books have informed me as well, largely. And it's your gift of being a sacred listener. And so that Kairos time requires trust, and it requires being aware, also questioning assumptions. Like, how do I know what's on the other side? Why can't I just relax into it and pause, have that pregnant pause? And that I learned from you. And so I want to kind of shift a little bit and talk about when I first met you.
Okay, that'll be fun.
We shared a condo in New York City when we were, how many were in one condo? 7, I think.
There were
7.
a lot of us, 7, 9, a lot.
And yeah, we had this great, like a high-rise apartment that had a beautiful view of, I don't remember what river it was, the Hudson, maybe, I don't know. And you were one of the, guests in the condo. And one morning, most everybody went to the commission, to the UN, and you and I stayed behind.
Right.
And we were served the most delicious avocado toast.
Oh, yes.
And yet you sat down with me on the couch, and as you're doing right now, you just have this graceful, elegant way of communicating. And I felt so listened to. You know, I love that quote that Kaylin Dahl introduced me to listen another into a condition of discovery and disclosure is possibly the greatest gift one human being can perform for another, Douglas Steer. And that is what you did for me. And I remember turning to you going, you're a great listener. You know, just being aware of that, because I could pause and recognize that.
Right.
I wonder how many people recognize that, but you created essence to essence, you know, relationship there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I like to talk about, I keep thinking I'll write about it someday. I don't know for sure. Fierce listening. And I created a model for fierce listening. I made a lot of postcards and gave them to people. So there really are some steps that people can follow and become a fierce listener. And you know, that beautiful quote, was that Kay's quote? That beautiful quote.
Douglas Steer, but Kay
Okay,
gave it
that's
to
right.
me.
Yeah, so beautiful, because it is one of the absolute greatest gifts we can give anybody. There's no question, no question. I noticed Matt Kahn has a new book out called, well, I don't even know what it's called, but it's about holding space. And that's really what fierce listening is, or deep listening. It's holding space energetically for the other person to express however they want to express.
One of the first lessons I learned about doing that was being aware of my thoughts when someone, I mean, as I was practicing this, and I constantly need to practice, I get easily distracted. So I have that condition and I'm constantly working on it, which means I have to intentionally be aware of what it means to be a good listener. And the first trigger was me realizing I'm preparing what I'm going to say next.
Uh-huh. That's
And
right.
that was really powerful for me. That really brought me back and saying, no, be here. And then, you know, it's for me, I was still in my head. I wasn't being a really good listener. I was still thinking about me and how I'm listening, rather than just releasing whatever is going on in my head and just totally being present. I still have that blockage of, and that condition I was really aware of what it means to really listen. And then I think what really helped me turn a corner, and then I've read, and I can't remember where I read it in your book. I don't remember where it was, but I know it came from you, was really the value that I was receiving and the gift I was giving, the sacred reciprocity.
The sacred reciprocity, absolutely. And like I said, then spirit moves in. I mean, we're already in spirit, so the language isn't so great, but an energy moves in. And then there's this agreement with the two people who are engaging in essence to essence communication to listen for the invisible thread, listen for what shows up, and then following that. So there's an agreement to follow what wants to show up in the conversation.
Yeah,
Then you get magic.
it's really magic because it's
Uh,
always not what you think it is.
uh-huh.
You
Right.
could design it. And that's what we try to do. We try to design the conversation.
Yeah.
I grew up in a household where, you know, in my world, and I can see the thread, I could see the pattern in all of my sisters and my parents, particularly my dad. I could see him always turning the subject somehow back to him. Well, here's how I relate. Well, here's what I do. And I realized when I went to Lake Shrine and practiced the sacred art of listening, because I was in a silent retreat, a 5-day silent retreat, how much I like to talk to people so I could turn the subject back to me, because I thought I'm at a dining room table with people and that are total strangers. I had know nothing about them, yet they know nothing about me. And how can they know my cool stories and all about me? And how can I impress them? This was, I mean, I'm sharing this in absolute vulnerability and honesty, right? This is what I recognized in me. And that really, it's, that ego, that side of my ego, that small ego. And so it was, yeah, I had to really pay attention to my small ego if I was really going to be in a essence to essence relationship. And that could mean the checker at the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have as much time, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, well, essence to essence, I think of as reciprocal. So the checker at the supermarket there might not be a lot of reciprocity there. I mean, there could be moments,
right.
but we live in this world. We live in this world where we're focused on the external constantly, constantly.
Yeah.
And fierce listening or sacred listening relies on our having our own attention inward and then holding the space for the other person to present what is arising from within them. Yeah, it's magic.
It is, and you make it in all of your books, even sacred marching orders, where you talk about solar energy, the solar feminine.
Right.
That even there you have such a beautiful way of guiding us there
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is not, you're not like teaching us, you're showing that within us. You're showing me who I am through your writing. And you are so skilled at that, skilled in a way that it's not mechanical, skilled in a way that's because you practice that. And my way of being a sacred listener to the gal or the person at the check stand is me practicing that.
Uh-huh.
Even though I'm not going to get it back, it becomes a habit for me.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And maybe that person will wake up and go, wow, that lady yesterday really listened to me.
Mhm. She might, or he might, they might. Yeah. You know what, as we're talking about this, I think I probably have it. I feel like I just want to step over to my closet here and pull out one of my fierce listening cards because they're so simple and user friendly, and it just might be something that would have value.
We'll take a commercial break.
Let's take a break. So here's what it looks like. It's something I made a long time ago. And I'm going to read them because I think that the listener might find it valuable. It's like it's very easy to follow. So I did fierce, so this is you call that an
IERC.
Yes. So the first is focus or full attention. So give the speaker your full undivided attention. That's number one, the F. And this is one of my favorites. I stands for intervals, which is like a threshold or a pregnant pause. If the speaker stops talking, honor the silence and wait patiently for her to resume speaking. And I want to tell you a little something that I talk about sometimes. A friend of mine is a therapist, and she was working with a group of women, and one of the women was very quiet and she didn't really participate too much. And so my friend asked her, it was a group setting, what are you good at? And she said, I'm really good at listening. And so my friend asked her, what do you know about listening? What have you learned about listening? And she said, I've learned that the story is in the pause. And she said, when my kids would come home from school and I'd say, how was your day? And they'd say, fine. And I would sit there and I would wait. And then they would tell me what really happened at school. So I love that. So the interval is really respecting that pause. And yeah, so I won't go off too much on that. And then the next E stands for erase ego and judgment. And that's probably one of the hardest ones. And so what it suggests is that you notice and let go of any thoughts that put the listener down or elevate yourself. You just kind of pay attention. And then this is another one I think is very, very, it helps a lot. And this one, the R stands for relinquish stage to speaker. And the little explanation is, remember that it is, excuse me, the speaker's turn to talk. So give her the attention you would give a performer on stage. So, and then the next is curiosity. And what that is being open and alert to what the speaker is saying. And then the last, the E, is expansive sense of time. And that is only practice fierce listening when you can allow adequate time to listen fully. You're creating the space. So those are just some things that I think, they're just right there, like, and if anybody pays attention to those, they can become a much better listener.
They're very practical and
Practical.
and applicable to every situation.
Right.
If we are intentionful, there are two
Right.
things that I love about that. Well, I love all of it. I'm sorry, but you mentioned the interval. And to me, that's the space in between, right? That's where it can be, it might look just like a moment, but it's, the great wild frontier of the space unknown until, infinity and beyond.
Yes.
And it's the Ma, which is the symbol, the ideogram of the Japanese symbol that means empty space, but it's really full, and it really is the pause in a poem, the length of a note, holding
Yeah.
a note between the notes. I mean, it's
Right.
based on the Torah that is intentional for us to breathe in our understanding and the universal, what may be a universal truth to everyone, besides the words. So it's that space is so valuable, that integral space. And I love asking the question, is there anything else that wants to be said? Also,
Absolutely.
that really, especially if you're hosting, facilitating circle.
Right. Exactly.
Because not only are you pausing and listening and making sure they're complete.
Mhm.
I've even been in a circle where we closed what we were saying in that moment with, I'm complete.
Right.
And saying, is there anything else that wants to be said? Even though you just said you're complete, is there anything else that wants to be said? And there usually always is.
Right. Right.
So sometimes what you're really always what you're doing with every one of those, the acronym is an invitation.
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful and elegant in its design.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is an invitation. And people don't have that experience that much. There are actually, I did a talk, one of the talks I did on fierce listening, and it went really well. It was really well attended. And there was an older woman that came up to me and said, thank you so much for talking about listening. And I said, well, we don't really talk about listening very much. And she said, we never talk about it. And we really don't. We really don't. Those of us who choose to focus on our capacity for listening, a lot of times that's therapists and people on a spiritual path. It's always in our consciousness. Those of us that are really focused, like Kay, I'm sure is, she's in a listening mode, so much of the time, probably almost all the time. So, some of us do, there's a few people that do it, but it's rare. It's
Yeah.
rare. Because most people want you to, they want to talk about what's going on with them. Like you said, with your, with your dad, I did this, I want this, I want that. Look at this, look at that. And it's all pointed outward. It's all pointed to the third dimensional world.
Yeah. And it's a practice. And again, like I said, you made it a guide. This woman who approached you, that was really interesting that, she mentioned, and that you clarified in a way that was true, as we just don't talk enough about the act of listening. And the statistics are astounding how much we do not do intentional listening. I think the percentage is like 17% of the time. First of all, only 50% of the time we're truly engaged in listening, and a third of that is not really intentional, like really listening to what's going on. And that's usually to a television commercial where we are being
Yeah.
we're being like duped by patriarchy's charm, I think is how I put it. Have a better life if we just do this right now and fast track. We're going to give you your gift. You don't even have to think harder. You just have to remember the number to call and give us your money.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's so much more there. You mentioned Kay, and I had her on an earlier program on the sacred art of listening. And I had mentioned in that conversation, and I'll share now, when we were in the Melbourne Parliament of the World's Religions, and she was doing her workshop, which she is famous for doing her workshop on the sacred art of listening. The room was a rather small room, and it quickly became packed. She couldn't even start because the room was too full. So they moved all of us to a bigger room that became almost as equally packed.
Wow.
And so for me, that meant that, that most people admitted that they were coming to learn how to listen. But it wasn't until she put us through an exercise where we were one-on-one. And this is where I want to get to your essence to essence conversations, where we were one-on-one, and we were to just have a conversation, tell this person something about ourselves, and then afterwards reflect on what it truly felt like to be listened to. After, of course, she gave us some tips, right?
Right.
And what was clear to me was that so many people showed up to learn how to listen, but nobody knew that really the power of what it felt like to be listened to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
The benefit of it is unbelievable.
It really is. It really is. It's one of the more important things, one of the more important aspects of our humanity. There was a woman, I can't remember her name. I'm not even sure this is the title of the book, but she was talking about technology and screen time. And I don't know whether it was one of her quotes or it was in a book title, when the other is a machine. That's scary stuff. That's really, really scary stuff. Because when the other is a machine, the other is not a human being. And that connection between human beings is, it's the most important thing we can do, is connect with love and care and reverence to other human beings. But, instead we're going like this most of the time.
Oh, that's what you mean by the machine. I was thinking you meant someone who's just walking through life in a trance, that they were not really honoring who they were so that they could listen and have empathy and have compassion that was authentic and have reverence.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And they made, the machine, she also talks about robots, they have these little dolls to give to people in memory care. Pardon?
Oh, yeah, I was listening. Yeah, you were referring to the machine of our phones in our
computer. The robots that become a focus of our life.
Yeah, we got to be careful there because they're programming now to pick up on our cadence,
Mhm.
to respond, and they're so human-like that it's really, really important to pay attention to how we've been being indoctrinated. And remember, we have free will, but
Mhm.
we can be a model for essence to essence. Speaking of relationships, I was reminded of this conversation that I had with Deborah Muldow,
Mhm.
and I was a guest of Deborah's, and we stayed together for a conference, and we were on the train going into town, and I was telling her I was having the same sort of reoccurring, really a pattern of unhealthy relationships in my life, and I
Mhm.
wonder why they keep emerging. And she listened and she goes, I know, I was just downloaded with this
Uh-huh.
information. You need to go do some generational work,
Mhm.
intergenerational work, and to
Mhm.
really explore what patterns in your life informed are informed by behaviors that you have picked up from, perhaps it's your immediate family. It could have been something, even a trauma that happened to you as a child or an adult, but it could also go back generationally that,
Right.
shows up in those patterns. And I was able to do that. And she gave me a simple step process
Mhm.
to do that, light a candle, invite in my ancestors, and start asking questions and then listening.
Mhm. Oh, wow. Mhm.
That really helped me not only see these folks that I could really kind of single out of
Mhm.
being not healthy relationships, and thinking, okay, not only did I see my role in that relationship being unhealthy, but I also put them in a really good place where I'm really okay not being in a relationship with them anymore, because
Mhm.
it was really an internal struggle to have them in my life, in my world. I
Mhm.
just didn't know how to deal with it. And that created, what a cloak of me being unreasonable, or me being having whatever issues or hangups or behaviors that I had. So it was very, very disclosing to who I was. And it helped me heal when I'm developing relationships since this time, moving forward and nurturing the relationships I have.
Mhm.
So relationship to relationship is so important that we maintain, because it teaches us who we are, right?
Our relationships teach us who
Yeah.
we
Aren't they a mirror for who we are?
are.
If I'm in a relationship with you and our relationship seems like it's struggling,
Right.
it gives me a moment, a pause, the
Mm.
interval, the
Uh-huh.
timefulness.
Right.
Go, okay, what's going on?
Uh-huh.
Why am I triggered by
Within you, what, yeah, yeah.
what is going on inside of me? And
Right.
I have the confidence to say, well, maybe it isn't me, but if it is, at least I'm willing to do that work.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, I was just trying, because I think about, as a therapist,
Mm,
um, I think about projection, and
ah,
projection is, we do it so much of the time. But when we're triggered, when somebody is we make them our enemy, and we're very reactive, definitely let's turn that mirror on ourselves for sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, really, and so many people spend so much energy on unhealthy relationships
Hmm.
that can either be worked through and resolved and always learned from, and then put in their place so we can go out and put our energies into the world that are healthy, because the world needs us to be healthy right now, right?
Yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. And to use our energy in the service of others and the planet. And if our energy is being used with conflict and judgment and ego, it's there's a loss. There's a lot of loss there.
Yeah, a loss of time and valuable energy, as well as a potential healthier relationship.
Mhm.
right? And also the angst we carry, or if there's anger, or maybe forgiveness isn't coming very easily and you're carrying
Mhm.
that burden. So there's so much to be said in this. So you've developed essence to essence conversations
Mhm.
as a tool. Can you say something about that?
About in relationships?
Well, I read in Sacred Marching Orders that you've developed essence to essence conversations. So is this a step-by-step way of conversing? Is it everything we've just been talking about?
I think it's everything we've been talking about. Yeah, yeah, I think it was a little bit confusing because when I started writing Sister Stewarding the Shift, that was all about essence to essence communication and then following the thread. Then I stopped. Once that was done, that book was fully edited, it wasn't really readable. It wasn't something that was going to work for as a book. It was too flowy. It was too, there wasn't enough concreteness to it. And so that was when I stopped that whole book project and then began again with Charlene with the sacred marching orders, including the solar feminine. That was really, really important. Yeah. So
Yeah.
um, I don't know if this is out of order or something to say or not, but what somebody told me a long time ago is that I have a skill, I guess, of making the abstract concrete. And I think that when it's concrete, um, people can hear it and see it and understand it, which is actually what you did, I think, beautifully with all your stories. Think of them as like a string of pearls, all your stories that make up Liminal Odyssey is people can relate to the actual experiences that you had and what you learned from the experiences, which you also, I think, describe in quite a concrete way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think I for me, I need those. I need to be simple.
Uh-huh.
I don't have
Right.
time to sit and contemplate. And often I do, but if I'm inspired by what I've read, then I'll go sit and contemplate.
Uh-huh.
If it's too heady, that's just my style, right? Right.
Right.
I like to, and I'm interested in what makes people tick. That's why I started Sarah. I
Uh-huh.
want to know, and I noticed, Pat, that I've used this expression like probably 5 or 6 times so far in our short time together. Informed. I was informed by an innate curiosity to know what makes people tick. What are their stories? I
Mhm.
never get into a taxi cab without asking what the taxi cab driver's story is, where they
Mhm.
come from, what's their family like, what more do they want to tell me? I always get more than I ask for. And it makes an interesting ride, but I also get to know about people. And so with Sarah, we're interfaith, so you get to know what informed that person because you're asking them questions on a deeper level um,
Right.
that comes from their value systems, which you get to do in a safe way in an interfaith conversation. So I've always been interested in storytelling and even in, I love in Sacred Marching Orders, which is one of my favorite books ever. And I love all of your writing. Sacred Marching Orders spoke to me because I carry a lot of solar energy, right? I'm a
Right.
doer and
Yeah.
I could use some more lessons on being a lunar and just really because I'm
Uh-huh.
constantly, it's sort of like you have an engine in fourth gear, you know, to downshift to second, takes me some, time and mind space and, getting out of my environment really takes intention. And
Uh-huh.
I don't, sorry, operate on fourth gear because
Uh-huh.
I just I want to follow all these threads, I can't wait to see what threads are going to appear and what's, at the end of that thread or what that thread is going to lead me to. So in Sacred Marching Orders, you balance it really beautifully. But I love the story of when Charlene, who was who you introduced me to and who I got to, in absolute reverence, work with on the Liminal Odyssey, how she really wanted to embody what it felt like to be in her solar energy. And she went and bought combat boots.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
And wore them, right?
Yep. And wore them all the time that she was editing. She was wearing the combat boots.
Good. So there are all of these fun things we can do. This doesn't have to be really heavy work. I mean, it can be, because we might have some unpacking to do.
Mhm.
I believe we all have some unpacking to do. Yet, and that's okay, because that's what we're here to do. When I was in Auschwitz, which I talked about in chapter 12, when I was in Auschwitz, I had this experience where I imagined it. For me, it was a very clear message from the victims of the Holocaust at Auschwitz that we choose love. And from that, I began thinking about, mourning us or seeing us as victims only holds you in a certain place. Go and create a better world, right? In our honor. This is really the message I was getting. And then it got me to really thinking about my own ancestors, some of which perished in the Holocaust. A large number of them did. And how hard they worked and they gave their lives for. And who am I to complain about my current situation? It's my privilege and my responsibility to do something about that. And I don't think I can do that if I am not practicing essence to essence relationships. And so with some time that we have left, I want to talk to you about what that means to turning that inward. I mean, I know we talked about it all being inward, but how often do we really give that same condition of listening
To ourselves.
to ourselves?
To our soul. Yeah, I'm so glad that you're bringing up what you're bringing up right now. I do want to tell you, I thought that as I was making some notes about what I wanted to make sure I said, this was something. That ending to your book, and I don't want people to cheat and go ahead to the ending, but oh my gosh, that is so extraordinary. So extraordinary. And choose love being the ultimate final message. So that I just it's so profound. It's so real. I mean, I had chills when I was reading it, and I thought about how wonderful it would be for other readers to get to that chapter at pretty much at the end and be able to read that experience. Yeah, there was something else though I wanted to say about that. I don't want to lose that. And maybe it's not going to come. Maybe it won't. But that's that piece. Just it's almost coming. Let me see. What was it? It was something else that was in the book that I wanted to. That's related to this. It's so close to coming. It's not coming. We'll see. We'll be a minute or two and then it'll go. Oh, I know what it was. It's something. I think maybe it was Sacred March Mouse. I don't know, but we'll continue on and you can edit away.
I'm good with that. Yeah, and I recall it. It's in my cellular because it rang true to me. And that's something that when you're doing sacred listening, when you're doing essence to essence, it because your soul lights up.
I remember what I was going to say now. I love the part in your book, and I read that a while ago, actually, and that is listening to your soul. So the essence to essence communication with, communicating with one's own soul, I think is one of the most valuable things we could possibly do.
Yeah, I agree. And Jean Shinoda Bolin asked me in a room full of women at a women's assembly in advance of the Parliament of the World's Religions in Salt Lake City.
Mhm.
What's your divine assignment and what's preventing you from achieving it?
Mhm.
And that really gave me pause.
Mhm.
And I realized in the process, I actually realized it in the process of writing. When I
Mhm.
wrote, I think everybody should write a book about their experiences, because you're going to discover things that showed up for you that you may just skip right over. It's a
Mhm.
threshold you leaped over rather than dove into.
Right. Right.
Writing, I discovered that was a moment that
Mhm.
I became acquainted with my soul. That I
Oh,
may have seen my soul for the first time, because I'm thinking, well, what's my, oh, I think she said my soul. Yeah, she used the
I,
expression
yeah, I
soul
remember
assignment,
it.
my soul
Yeah,
assignment, I
I
think.
remember it so well.
And when I thought thinking about soul assignment, or maybe I heard it another way, another place, but it was that, or I
Yeah.
imagined it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I thought, oh, wait, what is my soul here for? My soul has come
Right.
completely encoded with an intelligence to accomplish this thing
Yes. Yes.
and to be this. And
Mhm.
I'm and my job is to free my soul.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
every time I chip away at understanding generational trauma, every time I chip away at learning how to be a better listener, every time I chip away at becoming a better, I start shedding all of these garments that no longer serve me.
Mhm.
That gets me closer to my soul.
Mhm.
And you provide a guide for that. And it's such a
Oh,
junk
I
guide. It's
did
not like,
that.
here's how to do it and go do it. You just lay it out. It's just the display of
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
want to say poetry. I don't know what it is. It's just magic. Your books are magic.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, they come mostly from listening internally, and it's not exactly channeling, but it is tapping in and then writing what comes through, for
And
sure.
not editing, right? And not editing.
Or not at all.
For me,
Not
I want to edit, but it's like journaling is what you're doing.
Yeah, but it's a little bit, I mean, it's with a different intention, it's not, yeah, when I do writing for a book, I know that I'm not writing it just for me, I'm writing it for a reader, so it's not, yeah, it's not, um, yeah, it's not that, but, yeah, yeah. I think what you're talking about is, I don't have the book around, but I think there's like, communicating when you're awake and communicating when you're asleep. That might have been one of the graphs or something. I don't know.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can't tell you how many times I grabbed my head and said, who wrote that?
Oh, that's,
Stuff came through me. The whole thing, it was written, I would say 50% of it was written in that way.
mhm.
And I'm like, okay. And I can't tell you how many emails or texts Charlene got from me going, OMG, with, you know,
Yeah.
you know, or there it happened again. So that's what happens when we honor our soul, when we're truly listening, when we're having essence relationships with ourselves, we surprise the daylights out of who we are. And,
Uh-huh.
and we start operating in that way, right?
Mhm.
It becomes a habit, doesn't
Mhm.
it?
A way of life. Absolutely.
Yeah.
A way of life. Yeah.
And these are habits we can form. Have
Hmm.
to just be aware and remember, and then practice intention and
Hmm.
find something. For me, the hook was, you know, how often I was turning a subject back to myself.
Uh-huh.
Another indicator that helped me remember was the irritation I got from particularly my one of my sisters who is
Uh-huh.
famous for doing that. And I get it. It's interesting and it creates a certain flow of conversation, but it's topical, it's manufactured, you don't really get into the essence. So yeah, and I don't mind saying that publicly. I've said it to her. So and she knows
Uh-huh.
how I feel.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
sensitive, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, when people are, you said topical. Um, it's just talking about stuff. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean it's man, it's it's controlled, it's not
Uh,
really letting spirit in,
yeah, control is a good
all
word.
up here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right,
So
yeah.
I think these are triggers and things we can all pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And just start with the simplest trigger and
Uh-huh.
until and then the more you're aware, the more you find those spaces, the volume of spaces.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
That's
And
what
then you really can live in that space most of the time. I saw somewhere somebody posted probably that enlightened masters are fully in the present all the time. And that got my attention. And I went, yeah, that makes sense to me.
it sounds like there are accountability partners.
Uh-huh.
They're there we know they're there, so we better pay attention. Sometimes it helps to have that external knowledge. I think I apply something of the same philosophy to having my ancestors around me
Uh-huh.
and operating in their, self in their interest.
Mm-hmm.
What would they be proud of? And that helps me. Although it is still really here, I need that external reminder sometimes.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So acting on their behalf some of the
Uh,
time you're talking about.
yeah, out of respect to their highest ideals. And in terms of me I imagine it's for me to live my authentic life
Mm-hmm.
because they fought, died, suffered, so I could have this freedom.
Mm, 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 mm.
Yeah. And that goes to what I say a lot right now, just totally changing, talking about marching orders and the sacred, the solar feminine is what's happening in our country right now and
Mm,
women's rights. And I'm thinking, okay, I can handle the inconvenience of doing some homework on the products I buy and
mhm,
writing letters to corporations that support, the side that is really, in my opinion, not serving women at all and
mhm,
setting us back. I can write letters to corporations and letting them know I'm not going to buy the product anymore and ask all my friends to do the same.
mhm,
So I can do the little bit of inconvenience knowing that all the suffragists and all the women before them that inspired the suffragists to finally hit the streets and every activist since then to do their hard work, I can handle a little inconvenience
mhm,
in
mhm.
in the way that I can. So that's that there I had to listen into what was my this is a leap, I've really kind of
Huh?
stretched the edges of our conversation here, but talking about making it concrete and stuff we can do, we can really listen into am I showing up fully in my integrity? And if my integrity means to stand for something and make the world better or be in, respect of my ancestors, what does that mean for me? This is my story. This may not be yours, of course, right? But this is how I start with reverent listening, essence to essence, listening to my soul, and then put it into action.
Mhm.
So,
Right, right, yeah, and you're very good at that. You're very good at taking action. And this is a crucial, crucial, crucial time that we are taking action. Patriarchy has really, I want to say, demanded, required that women and girls be quite passive and to just focus on how do I get myself a boyfriend? How's this makeup look? Do I have, an extra pound on my hips and do I need to go to the gym for, 2 hours? I mean, all these ways that we are confined, and our authentic self is, it's not nourished. There's no space for it because it's all about conforming to the status quo.
And we never, we used to not be that way, right? We used to not be that way. There was an era where there's egalitarian societies, and
Oh, mhm.
and we, and then we've gone through the burning times, and we believed the patriarchy, and we are still in a lot of conditions, and women too are
Mhm.
perpetuating a lot of patriarchal tendencies, and it
Right.
just isn't serving us the way it might have. I mean, we got the industrial age, we got all kinds of developments and things like that
Mhm.
were necessary to be in that way, to some degree. We don't know, but if who's to say what it would have been otherwise? But
Mhm.
now that we recognize that it's just time, not cosmologists, quantum physicists are recognizing we're in a second quantum revolution, the
Mhm.
first being in the turn of the century and of the 19th century, the 20th century, and now they're discovering more and more particles in the spaces in between the billions and trillions of that they
Yeah.
discovered originally. And
Yes.
this means now, with what this new telescope has shown us, right, that I mean, there's the discoveries are mind blowing. And I really think our mind is catching up to our spirituality as
Mm,
well. So our
mm.
minds are expanding. So there's some biological perhaps, and but definitely in terms of physics, there are indicators in science that prove that we are evolving. So that's the good news. That's
Very good news.
right.
Very,
And
very good news. And it's been predicted. It's been predicted by indigenous cultures primarily, but I think, Buddhist, Hindu prophecy as well, that we are evolving and we will make a quantum leap. Maybe we're in the midst of the quantum leap.
yeah, I think this is our grand liminal space we are in right now.
Mhm.
I really do.
Absolutely.
I mean, I look at the indicators. I
Mhm.
think there's two big indicators. One is that things are falling apart at an alarming rate.
Right.
Um, and at the same time, and they're all life threatening, right? So we're really feeling it. I mean,
Mm,
uh,
mm.
air, water, our two basic needs, are really becoming a reality to people, where they didn't believe the Native American man on the television in his regalia with a tear going down his face in the 70s, and all those ecology signs, everywhere, that green E. Um, Now we're feeling it. It's becoming personal. Like, look at COVID, and there's still some that don't believe that that's a sign, an indicator that that our systems are crashing. And the other indicator is the um, enormous tsunami of spiritual activists showing
Mhm. Mhm.
at an alarming rate.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
giving rise
Mhm.
to the resistance. We are their good resistance.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
how do we do that? And reverent listening and essence to essence listening is where it all begins for us to know how to live into being a spiritual activist.
Mm.
I think what you're doing, what you're talking about, is at the absolute center of the seed of the.
Mhm. Mhm. It is central, the listening. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think it's in Sacred Marching Orders, that download that Victoria Hanchin got, called Listening as the New Weaponry. It's very, very beautiful writing. And it really talks about that as the most important thing, the listening. Yeah, it should be right. Yeah, listening is new weaponry. I'm sure it has to be in sacred marching orders.
Yeah, it is, because I was just, skimming through this yesterday, actually, also, because it's been a while since I read it.
Mhm.
And I've got so many check marks, highlight areas and things. Um, I just want to see if this is, well, speaking about this is a little different, but it refers to what I was talking about earlier. And you referred to Julie Raymond, and she wrote the book We the Trees. has done extensive research on how we carry the ancient memories, talking about we have, we have those memories in our DNA, right?
Absolutely.
And they've been coming out sideways through the arts in different ways.
Mhm.
It's there, the memories of our indigenous roots, the violence of the severing of the roots, and the 5,000-year occupation of the patriarchy. No wonder it's hard for us to wake up,
Right, absolutely.
but we're waking up.
Absolutely.
We really are. And your book is timeless, actually. And
Mhm.
that, even though, when was this written?
Probably about, I think 2010 or 11.
It was copywritten in 2011.
Uh-huh.
So it's still timeless, even though so much has changed. You
Mhm.
really foretell the future we're in right now in
Mhm.
such a beautiful way.
Mhm.
And another indicator is that indigenous people are coming off of their ancestral lands. Some medicine people have started coming off their ancestral lands for the first time in the recorded history of the people. And they keep the recorded history, and they say they, to send this message. There are conversations with the Pope right now to rescind the doctrine of discovery, which is the doctrine of patriarchy, basically, that was our country was founded on. So it's the original culture of our country in the United States to be in a system of patriarchy and domination. I mean, we came to civilize others. So,
Right.
it just, and everything has come from that. We need a redo. And that's what this liminal space is inviting us into. And
Mhm.
I thank you for showing up. It's such an honor to be alive at the same time as you.
Mm. Well, we got a little mutual admiration society going on.
Well, you always operate in an enlightened self-interest. Everything you do always benefits others.
Mm.
That is such a beautiful expression of being a spiritual activist. So thank you.
It's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but that is one of the, I'm lucky that I have a profession as a psychotherapist, that I am in service and I also get paid.
Right. So so if anybody is watching this, you just sampled what it means to be in sacred listening with Patricia Fero. I have to call you Pat. And and they can find you at patriciafero.com.
Yeah, yeah, that's my website. Yeah. And I do, I do get messages through there. And my new book, What Happens When Women Converge, I will get on the website.
Okay,
But
but
it's awesome.
it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
Yeah, for
Of
sure.
course, yes. And of course, you know that Dale Allen is reading it for Audible.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right. I cannot wait. I've got a credit on my Audible account waiting for your book. So
Yeah, it's gonna be soon. I've gone over it, and then Dale will be uploading it, and that'll be fun that it's available that way.
that's so great. That's
Yeah.
so great because you'll be out in the airwaves now as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pat. I really appreciate you. Now, there is something that I didn't say in the top of this call, and it's something I want to include. I believe my friend Monica Willard, who is who was the UN representative of the United Nations, and
Right.
very much involved in the United Religions Initiative, and she called me one late evening and said, "Sandy, I have an idea," which means I better listen. And
Uh-huh.
said, all the symbols that you have on your chapters,
Mhm.
those symbols, which were a download that I got after my book was already at the interior design of
Uh-huh.
people, um, I had to pull it back and have a symbol representing each of the energy levels of the book. And then she said, you've got to include and incorporate that energy into your kitchen table conversations, which
Uh-huh.
is why I put, and it's very subtle, but I do mention it here. And it didn't come up, but I decided not to interject and throw it in because I trusted that energy would be here, and you'd never disappoint, Pat. But I use the symbol, if you notice on your flyer, of the Maiden Mother Crone, of the triple God.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
Because you do bring crone wisdom that is infused with maiden and mother qualities, which the crone always is. And
Mhm.
so that's the meaning of the symbol on the flyer.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your awareness about that and your action that you took by putting it there.
Well, and listening to Monica.
Ah, right.